people have the same names and there's intermarriage and it gets confusing. But I think what you do by honing in on these particular stories, it's so readable and so accessible, even for people, I think, who don't know anything about it.
Well, I'm glad you think that, because, you know, there's a proliferation of the same names. So Mark Antony had 3 daughters called Antonia, which must have caused some confusion at home. And then his final wife, he had another daughter with. And, you know, the Roman tradition, she would have been Antonia number 4.
Yes.
But his new wife was Cleopatra, who was Queen of Egypt, and she said, no, I'm not having that. This daughter is Cleopatra. So somebody at last had their own name. But it's an indication of how little women were valued, that men had 3 names in ancient Rome. Women only had 2. They didn't have what we think of as first names.
Yes.
So when we talk about a woman called Julia or Agrippina, it's like calling them Smith or Brown. Those are their surnames. And you know, you kind of assume there must have been nicknames.
Yes.
Because if you had 3 daughters all
you would have thought.
called Antonia, it would have made life a bit difficult.
I mean, Gaius got called Little Boots, he got called Caligula. So you have, like, little nicknames here and there. So, I mean, is part of the problem that when you're dealing with sources that are so biased, I mean, the emperors don't come off well either in Suetonius, and, you know, a lot of that stuff about Tiberius and Capri, I don't believe a word of it, you know. So is the problem that we should really approach all of these historians with a huge grain of salt?
Yes, but I think what's happened is that, you know, there's this revisionist take now, which is that, oh, you know, Suetonius and Tacitus, they're not reliable sources, and they were really rude about the emperors. But the women, everything's true.
Yeah, that's
and
interesting,
that's the problem.
Yes.
And I'm saying, what if we reverse that and say, well, maybe the things that the emperors were accused of, maybe those things are true, and maybe it's the stuff about the women that's made up.
So let's talk about a couple of the women. So Livia is an interesting example because, I mean, in I, Claudius, the BBC show, I think Sian Phillips' performance is incredible, and I think that's the best role in the show. But it's an interesting debate, isn't it? Because to what extent do they have a responsibility to represent her accurately? Because in that show, she kills everyone.
Yes.
She's the ultimate villain.
And that comes from... Tacitus is always quite careful, and he doesn't accuse Livia of murdering people. He'll say, some people said.
Yeah.
It was rumoured, you know, the things like that. In Robert Graves, when he writes I, Claudius and Claudius the God, he accuses her of 8 murders, and 7 of those people were not murdered.
Yes.
They died of natural causes or in battle. And the 8th was murdered, but not by her.
Yes.
And, you know, I was listening a while ago, Sian Phillips, who I think is in her 90s now, was on Woman's Hour. And it was you know, interesting to hear her talk, but she was immediately introduced as, you know, Sian Phillips, who played the murderous matriarch in I, Claudius.
Which I suppose is true in the context of the drama,
but it's not
true historically. So that's something that you're trying to redress in this book, isn't it? And that's what it very clearly comes across. We get a closer sense of who these people actually are. I mean, one of the other examples I wanted to mention was Messalina. Perhaps if you could talk a bit about her.
Yes, there's, in the plates of the book, which I chose, part of the reason I've been on this tour of Italy is looking at pictures and statues. There's a wonderful statue of the Empress Messalina in the Louvre, and, you know, she's a very young woman, probably only 18 or 19, and she's got her son balanced on her hip. And what I've put on the opposite page is Aubrey Beardsley's absolutely vile caricature of her, supposedly coming back from the brothel where she moonlighted as a prostitute, as so many women do. And you know, the contrast between the two is absolutely extraordinary. And it comes from Juvenal, the satirist, and he wrote a diatribe against women in marriage, and he describes Messalina as working night shifts in a brothel, and the caption to the picture in the Aubrey Beardsley image, which is in the V&A, says this is her returning unsatisfied from the brothel.
Yes.
Because Juvenal calls her, you know, this is another nymphomaniac. She's so unsatisfied. He talks about her having, you know, here's a bit of Latin for you. He describes her having a tentago, which is the Latin word for a male erection. And the reason she's so miserable looking in this Beardsley drawing is that she's got a throbbing clitoris because she's never satisfied. I mean, all of this is completely and utterly made up. And this young woman, eventually, you know, who was married at probably the age of 13 or 14 to, you know, the odious Claudius, who was farting and drunken and overeating and sex mad, and she provided him with 2 children. But it's a very sad story, and eventually she goes through, when he's out of town, she goes through a kind of bigamous marriage, and he comes back and has her run through with a sword. It's a very, very sad story. Well,
I think your book is an excellent corrective to a lot of these myths that have been perpetrated. So it's called Unfortunately, She Was an Nymphomaniac. It's out right now. Joan Smith, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
So last week, the Taliban's Minister for Virtue banned adult women from speaking with each other. I'm going to be joined by Yasmin Mohammed to discuss that story. Don't go anywhere.
Hello there, good evening. This is your latest GBNews weather forecast provided by the Met Office. We've been searching for the colour amongst the grey clouds this weekend, and that is continuing right until the very last hours of the day. Still a lot of grey skies for much of England, Wales and Northern Ireland throughout this evening and overnight. The odd spot of drizzle will be out there. The clearest skies will be reserved for the far north of Scotland. Here, temperatures will drop off a little bit more. Patchy frost is possible overnight. Elsewhere, though, that blanket of cloud will hold temperatures up on the positive side of things. With high pressure in charge, it does mean we have relatively light winds across the board tomorrow, but we are still plagued by all of this cloud. So the skies are going to be pretty grey and drab for many of us. Mostly dry, but I certainly can't rule out the odd spot of drizzle around in places, particularly around coast and over the hills where it could be quite murky at times. The best of the sunshine first thing will be likely again for the northern areas of Scotland. But once we get into the afternoon, hopefully we should start to see the cloud breaking up a bit more, particularly for the likes of Western Northern Ireland, parts of Western Wales, some potentially Cornwall as well. Also the far southeast of England, tapping into some of this clearing sky across France as well, allowing that sunshine to poke through later on as well. Temperatures will be roughly where we'd expect them to be for the time of year, topping up around 11 to 13 degrees Celsius, but certainly those that hold on to the cloud throughout the day will be feeling quite cool. As we head throughout the week, high pressure is still in charge. It's going to keep these weather fronts at bay out in the Atlantic, so it is again going to be mostly dry away from those outbreaks of drizzle that the cloud could be thick enough to produce in time. Tuesday morning could be quite foggy in places. Do watch out for potential a little bit of disruption around at times, but again, widespread grey skies for a lot of us, just hoping for those locations to potentially see a few brighter breaks in there at times. But really, the outlook throughout much of the week is for the cloud to remain, though temperatures may be coming up a little bit later on. Enjoy the evening. Bye-bye.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Court cases,
A presidential dropout.
assassination attempts,
This has been a US election like no other.
and if the polls are correct, it's on a knife edge.
On Tuesday night, stay up with us as the drama unfolds and America decides their next president.
We'll discuss what it means for them, for the world, and for our special relationship. America Decides, Tuesday night from 11.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Later in the show, I'll be turning agony uncle with the help of my panel, Lewis and Leo, and we'll help you deal with your unfiltered dilemmas. So, if you've got any problems at all, you can message us at gbnews.com/yoursay, and we'll help you. Last week, the Taliban's Minister for Virtue banned adult women from speaking with each other. It's the latest in a long line of crackdowns by the Taliban as women's rights continue to be eroded in Afghanistan. Now, to discuss this, I'm delighted to be joined by the human rights campaigner and author, Yasmin Mohammed. Yasmin, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
When the Taliban came back into power, when the Americans withdrew from Afghanistan, it was said that there was a Taliban 2.0, that this was a more progressive Taliban, that they wouldn't be so aggressive towards women, and they've just been making things worse and worse and worse. Isn't that right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's no surprise to any rational human being. This was expected.
And women's rights in particular, of course, now women not being able to talk to each other. So why is it, do you think, that people in the West didn't anticipate this? Why didn't we see this coming?
I mean, that's a really great question. I have no idea. Because in the time between the Taliban before in the 90s and now, we had Al-Qaeda, we had ISIS, we had all sorts of examples of the exact same kinds of people. But for whatever reason, they thought that these guys were going to be different.
Yes.
And they, of course, not only did they do the exact same thing that they did before, but they've actually made it worse. You know, whereas before they were saying girls couldn't go to school, now on top of that, they've added girls can't even leave the house, they can't go to the park, they can't ride in taxis, they can't drive cars, you know, they can't speak to each other.
Yes.
Their voices can't be heard. I mean, it's absolutely insane.
So is there more that people in the West and campaigners in the West can be doing? Because I've seen a number of articles in publications like The Guardian saying that wearing the hijab is an empowering thing. When we had the Women's March in 2017, it was a woman in a hijab as the symbol of that march. How does that make you feel?
That makes me feel incredibly betrayed, incredibly sad, incredibly angry. There are women right now that are languishing in prisons, women that have been killed, that have been beaten to death over the hijab. We're not talking about history, we're talking about currently, right now. And yet they can still pretend that this is some sort of symbol of women's empowerment. You know, how can you so blatantly lie when these women are suffering? Just today in Iran, there was a young woman in Tehran University who was being harassed by the morality police at her university, and they were pulling on her hijab, and so she got so frustrated, she pulled off the rest of her clothes. And then she walked around her campus in such anger, but also in fierce defiance of their rules.
I think we have some imagery of that protester, and I think this is a particularly good example of someone who's so incredibly courageous to sort of stand there. Let's have a look now at this image. Now, Yasmin, I know that in that clip she's then eventually detained, and of course there are this group called the morality police, and I mean, she's really putting her life on the line, isn't she?
She is, absolutely. And how many more women have to continue to put their lives on the line? How many women were out for the Women Life Freedom Movement all across the world, speaking up for Mahsa Amini, who was beaten to death by the morality police over hijab? How many more times do we have to say this over and over and over again? How many women have to die before people start to pay attention?
So is it because people in the West feel that it might be deemed Islamophobic or racist to criticise these other countries?
Absolutely, that's exactly what it is. But you have the same issue here in the UK, where they thought it was racist to criticise the Pakistani rape gangs, and therefore they left those poor girls to continue to be, you know, in rape gangs for years. Girls as young as 8 years old and 11 years old. They will throw these women under the bus. They're not interested in protecting women. They're not interested in protecting victims. They're interested in protecting the ideology. They're interested in protecting these extremist men who are the ones who are the perpetrators of these crimes against these women. It's absolutely insane.
And you've got personal experience, of course. You were in a forced marriage with an al-Qaeda operative, and you came from a background where your mother at that point was very, very devout. How difficult is it to leave that kind of, well, religion?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. People ask it all the time, and the only thing I can liken it to is asking, why don't more people escape from North Korea? It's really that bad. It is not only the mental, you know, prison that you're in, because you're indoctrinated into this. You're indoctrinated to believe that you are lesser than.
And you believe that as well?
Absolutely. I was told that there are a hadith that the Prophet of Allah has said that women are less intelligent than men. There are ayahs in the Quran that tell men that they can beat their wives if they fear from them arrogance or if they disobey them. There are ayahs in the Quran that say that men are the guardians of women. And these are the ayahs that are used in places like Saudi Arabia and Pakistan and Afghanistan and, you know, all over to keep women down.
And yet, Iran, before the revolution, women could wear whatever they wanted. I mean, things seem to be getting worse rather than better across the Arab world.
Absolutely, and that's because now they have the Islamic regime of Iran. And so this is why when you see things that are happening in Iran, and we can say, well, it's also happening in Afghanistan, it's also happening in Saudi Arabia, and it's also happening in Pakistan. These are all countries that people speak different languages, they have different cultures, they have different traditions, they have different food, they have different history. What is the one common thread that they all have in common? Islam.
And yet the criticism of Islam is a real taboo. I mean, in the UK, we've had cross-party support for a definition of Islamophobia, which is a form of racism about Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. What do you make of that definition?
First of all, Islam is not a race. It's a religion. And like I just explained, there are people from all over the world. You could be Somali, Egyptian, Indonesian. These are all different races. These are all different people all over the world. And so Islam is not a race. It's an ideology. And to criminalize criticizing an ideology is, I mean, this is the name of your show, right? Like this is you're now infringing on people's rights. Can we not criticize communism? Can we not criticize conservatism? Can we not criticize anything? Why is it this is the sacred cow?
So anti-Muslim bigotry exists, though?
Absolutely.
And that could be the way that we describe it rather than Islamophobia, I suppose.
Absolutely, that's right. And we already do have those things in place. We already do have laws against bigotry, against people based on their immutable characteristics, you know, whether it be the male, female, you know, gay, straight, their age, their religion, their skin color. We already have those in place.
So what can actually be done? Because like you say, escaping from North Korea, it feels like an impossible thing to do. These women are in that similar position.
Yeah.
What can possibly be done to improve their lives?
Great question. Thank you so much for asking it. When women speak up in these countries, as they do all the time, instead of supporting the oppressors and the perpetrators of these crimes, how about we support these women instead? When you have women in Egypt who are trying to make beating your wife a criminal offense, or when you have women in Iraq who are fighting against the parliament, who want to claw back the age of marriage from 18 to 9 years old, support those women. Support the open-minded, liberal-minded, progressive-minded people in these countries instead of supporting the extremists, which is, as you said earlier on, that's exactly what they do when they support groups like the Taliban.
Well, I think that's a really compelling point that you make. And where can people find out more about you and your writing and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so my book is called Unveiled, How the West Empowers Radical Muslims, which is exactly what we're talking about here today. And you can find it at amazon.co.uk. And you can go to my website, yasminmohammed.com, to learn about my other work that I'm doing, including a podcast where I speak to many other people like me.
Fantastic. Yasmin Mohammed, thanks so much for joining me. And next on Free Speech Nation, we'll be speaking to the comedian Tyler Fisher, who was banned for life from Delta Airline after posting a joke on X. Don't go anywhere.
Court cases.
A presidential dropout.
Assassination attempts.
This has been a US election like no other.
And if the polls are correct, it's on a knife edge.
On Tuesday night, stay up with us as the drama unfolds and America decides their next president.
We'll discuss what it means for them, for the world, and for our special relationship. America Decides, Tuesday night from 11.
Only on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
The former royal correspondent for the Sun newspaper, Charles Ray. Good to see you this morning, Charles, and so good to see Catherine back to work with a hug.
It is. It's fantastic. I mean, there are a few royal jobs that you know, touch at the heartstrings, and this is certainly one of those. And I think it's the first time we've actually seen Catherine back in, you know, a royal duty since she herself confirmed that she'd finished chemotherapy.
Done so much, haven't they, the Princess of Wales and the King, to raise awareness for these cancers.
Here we have both the King and Catherine having, you know, explained to the nation and the rest of the world that they were battling, or are still battling, cancer, just like everyone else.
How sincere is all of this? I mean, it looks it looks like she's a wonderful, kind, caring woman, but I don't know. I've never met her.
Well, she is a wonderful, kind, caring woman. That is without a shadow of a doubt. And they heard, or William heard, about this young lady on a visit to the air ambulance, and they invited her because she's a photographer, so she wanted to take she has a bucket list and wanted to take pictures of an investiture. I mean, make no mistake, people like Catherine are just absolutely wonderful in what they do and how they do it. I mean, and Catherine is the superstar of the royal family. Of that, there is no doubt.
It's the cockles of my heart, Charles. It really does. It's really good to see you. Thanks very much.
All the
Thanks,
best.
Charles. Thanks. And Liz, who is this 16-year-old amateur photographer who was hugged by Princess of Wales yesterday, said it was a dream come true.
I bet it was.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Now, across the pond, comedian Tyler Fisher has been banned, yes, banned, from flying with Delta Airlines for life. He got banned because he made a joke on X about the airline. We've got a little clip of him talking about it.
Holy I just got banned from Delta Airlines for the rest of my life for a joke I put on X.
Hey, Mr. Fisher, this is Jesse with Delta Airlines. You have been placed on Delta's permanent no-fly list, and your upcoming travel on August 11th has been canceled.
I got banned from one of the biggest airlines in the world for making a joke. Nothing happened on the plane. This is it, right here. I'm going to show you. That's the tweet, right there.
And I'm delighted to say Tyler Fisher joins me now. Tyler, welcome to the show. Firstly, that was a week ago. Are you still banned from Delta Airlines, or have you sorted it out?
I am, and I'm just packing because I have to take a few trucks. I dress like a trucker. I'm taking trucks and trains. I'm still banned from Delta Airlines. I did finally receive a call from them. They said they wanted to have an important talk, which I assumed was going to be some sort of woke virtue signal shaming, you know. They said they're going to allow me to appeal on Monday. And I said, well, you said it was a permanent lifetime ban. And they said, well, that's just the language we use. So as you know, with the very woke left, language means nothing. Gender means nothing. Their permanent ban apparently identifies as a possible partial ban.
Well, look, Tyler, I've had a permanent suspension on Twitter and I came back. Tell me, though, like, is it because you were joking about the LGBTQIA2S+ movement? Is that really what this is about, that it's because of it's a protected characteristic?
Yeah, you actually left out a couple symbols.
I know.
There's an umlaut. There's now an umlaut added, Andrew. Absolutely, absolutely. For example, Delta just changed their policy to ban all flag pins because somebody took a photo of a Palestinian pin and basically categorized them as terrorists. So Delta didn't ban that customer, they banned the pins.
Yeah.
I made a joke about the pride pin, they banned the customer. So I think we all know what's happening, which is it's a protected group. Free speech, I thought, was allowed in my country, but we're looking more like you guys now.
Yeah, but you weren't having a go at someone for being gay. You were making a joke about the very idea that it's relevant to a passenger to know who the steward is sleeping with, which I think is a fair point.
Exactly. Yeah. And I wasn't making fun of the sexuality. I also, under the tweet, said I wouldn't want to see a straight pride pin. You know, I wouldn't want the pilot to have, hey, I'm proud of my missionary, I don't care. And it was a joke, but even if it wasn't a joke, you would think you'd be able to at least question it, but apparently not at Delta.
But Tyler, you've made a career now and become very well known by joking about these things. And is that because so many comedians just won't go near it?
Yeah, and for me, like, I was always a very silly impressionist, and I didn't really do anything controversial. The last time I was on your show, we talked about a lawsuit that is 3 years later still pending where I was denied acting and comedy representation because they said, we're not willing to hire a straight white male. I recorded that phone call, and I'm taking them to the Supreme Court. So a lot of my comedy is actually just a reaction to what's happening. I didn't set out to create controversy or get banned from an airline. These are just basic human rights, like being able to be a white man and be an actor, or being able to ask a question or joke about a rainbow pin.
And I mean, that's quite a serious case. So you're saying it's still going on. It hasn't got to the Supreme Court. But that could establish a precedent, could it not? Because surely discrimination by skin colour is illegal in the US.
Absolutely illegal. But again, the woke left is creating these subset of made-up rules that people seem to be following. And so I can't really say how it's going to turn out. I hope that, the jury agrees you can't make an exception. Just because I look like I stormed the Capitol in a Tesla doesn't mean I'm an evil white guy. So yeah, it's a wild time. And if Kamala gets in, strap in, because all of this stuff is going to get turned up. That's why you got to go vote, Andrew. You could even come vote. You don't have to be a citizen. We'll fly you out and you can vote. I'll bring you in myself.
But, you'll have a lot more material if that happens. So you're on tour at the moment. Are you actually performing at the moment, or has this really stunted things?
Yeah, I'm in Cleveland. I've actually lost over $10,000 from Delta canceling flights, me not being able to, Delta's a big one. So, but I'm finding a way. I'm performing in Cleveland tonight. I'll be in San Diego and Missouri, and everything is on my website. But also I'm shadow banned online right now. That's why I wear this hat with my Instagram handle, because you have to type it out. Yeah.
Tyler, that's all we got time for, but people will check you out. Tyler Fisher, everyone.
Thanks so much for having me.
That's the end of our first hour on Free Speech Nation. Don't go anywhere.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. This is your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. We've been searching for the colour amongst the grey clouds this weekend, and that is continuing right until the very last hours of the day. Still a lot of grey skies for much of England, Wales and Northern Ireland throughout this evening and overnight. The odd spot of drizzle will be out there. The clearest skies will be reserved for the far north of Scotland. Here, temperatures will drop off a little bit more. Patchy frost is possible overnight. Elsewhere, though, that blanket of cloud will hold temperatures up on the positive side of things. With high pressure in charge, it does mean we have relatively light winds across the board tomorrow, but we are still plagued by all of this cloud. So the skies are going to be pretty grey and drab for many of us. Mostly dry, but I certainly can't rule out the odd spot of drizzle around in places, particularly around coast and over the hills, where it could be quite murky at times. The best of the sunshine first thing will be likely again for the northern areas of Scotland. But once we get into the afternoon, hopefully we should start to see the cloud breaking up a bit more, particularly for the likes of Western Northern Ireland, parts of Western Wales, some potentially Cornwall as well. Also the far southeast of England, tapping into some of this clearing sky across France as well, allowing that sunshine to poke through later on as well. Temperatures will be roughly where we'd expect them to be for the time of year, topping up around 11 to 13 degrees Celsius, but certainly those that hold on to the cloud throughout the day will be feeling quite cool. As we head throughout the week, high pressure is still in charge. It's going to keep these weather fronts at bay out in the Atlantic, so it is again going to be mostly dry away from those outbreaks of drizzle that the cloud could be thick enough to produce in time. Tuesday morning could be quite foggy in places. Do watch out for potential a little bit of disruption around at times, but again, widespread grey skies for a lot of us, just hoping for those locations to potentially see a few brighter breaks in there at times. But really, the outlook throughout much of the week is for the cloud to remain, though temperatures may be coming up a little bit later on. Enjoy the evening. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could win Christmas on us this year. There's cash, £20,025 in tax-free cash to make your new year go with a bang. There's also £5,000 to spend on all the gifts. We've also got Christmas lunch for you, with £500 in vouchers to spend at your favourite supermarket. And finally, a festive GB News goodie bag. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Osama bin Laden issued a fatwa entitled World Front for Combat Against Jews and Crusaders, and President George W. Bush talked of a crusade on terrorism. In 2010, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula sent a parcel bomb to New York. It was addressed to Reginald of Chatillon. The addressee had died at the hands of Saladin in 1187. Those facts suggest that the long history of struggle between Christendom and Islamic caliphates remains relevant, at least to some militant Islamists. That being the case, perhaps we should all understand the past. General Sir Simon Mayle, a former Deputy Chief of the Defence Staff Operations, can be our teacher, particularly if we want to know in gory detail about battles to control Jerusalem, Constantinople, Vienna and the Eastern Mediterranean. His new book is called The House of War. It's an excellent read, which perhaps ought to figure in a national adult curriculum. And he joins me. But let's begin with the word crusade. What was it that drove Christians around Europe to want to cross to the Holy Land and seize Jerusalem?
Context and timing is really important to understand. It's been rather stereotyped as Christian aggression against peace-loving Muslims. The Islamic religion had burst out of the desert in the 7th century with the death of the Prophet Muhammad, and for the next nearly 400 years had Christianity, Christendom, the Christian states absolutely on the back foot. It took the Holy Land, destroyed the Persian Empire, took the North Africa, which was Christian at the time, including Egypt, of course, took Spain all the way into Tours, Charles Martel. 100 years after the death of the Prophet, it expanded in an extraordinary state.
GB News, the People's Channel.
There's plenty more still to come on Free Speech Nation this week, but let's get a news update first from Tatiana Sanchez.
Andrew, thank you very much. The top stories. Well, some breaking news into us in the last few minutes that GB News understands that Rebecca Harris will be the new Shadow Chief Whip. More on that breaking story as we get it. Meanwhile, Kemi Badenoch says she'll tell hard truths to both the country and her party as she began her first full day as Conservative leader. She's vowed to ensure a fresh start for the party ahead of announcing her shadow cabinet. She's also said Partygate was overblown and the government should not have fined people for everyday activities during lockdown. Kemi Badenoch won more than 53,000 votes in the contest, whilst her rival Robert Jenrick received 41,000. Ms Badenoch is expected to name her shadow cabinet in the coming days, ahead of that first meeting on Tuesday with former contenders Robert Jenrick, Tom Tugendhat, Mel Stride and Dame Priti Patel reportedly open to front bench positions. Elsewhere, Labour MP Dawn Butler shared a social media post accusing Kemi Badenoch of representing white supremacy in blackface shortly before she was elected as the new Tory leader. The Brent East MP has since deleted the repost from her X account. Neither Downing Street nor Dawn Butler have made any comments.
She's a race baiter. Why has she still got the whip?
Look, that's up to Labour.
What do you think, genuinely?
I genuinely think that, given what she said, she should have the whip removed from her. There should be some discipline and some disciplinary measure against this kind of really hateful, divisive.
I was reminded.
A joint investigation from both Channel 4 and the Sunday Times has revealed the full details of the property estates owned by King Charles and Prince William. The investigation shows the vast array of commercial property the royal family has built up from the time of medieval monarchs. Their contracts with public bodies are said to include a £37 million agreement with the Ministry of Justice and an £11.4 million deal with Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Trust. A spokesman for the Duchy of Cornwall said it was a private estate with a commercial imperative, while the Duchy of Lancaster said their business complies with all relevant UK legislation and regulatory standards. Well, that comes as Prince William travels to South Africa this week for his Earthshot Prize Award ceremony. That prize is hoped to recognise environmental solutions to repair the planet. Now, protests have erupted in Valencia as King Felipe visited areas affected by recent flash flooding. Residents shouted murderers when the King and Queen arrived in the area, and mud was also thrown towards the monarch. The deadliest flash floods in Spain's modern history have killed at least 214 people. Dozens are still unaccounted for 4 days after torrential rains swept the eastern region of Valencia. Now, there are just 2 days to go until the US election, and shock polling from a traditionally Republican Iowa has placed Democratic candidate Kamala Harris ahead of Donald Trump by 3 points. It comes as Kamala Harris appeared overnight in a comedy sketch on Saturday Night Live in New York, where comedian Maya Rudolph dressed as the current vice president. Polls elsewhere in states such as Pennsylvania and Michigan show the two candidates are tied ahead of Election Day on Tuesday. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Let's get some more questions from the audience. Our first question has actually come in from email. This is from Martin G. Martin G says, did Robert Jenrick go too far? OK, but this is presumably his comments about former colonies and how they should be thanking us for the legacy of empire. And, of course, this is, I suppose, to do with the debate about slavery, reparations and all the rest of it. What do you make of that? Did he go too far?
No, I don't think he went too far at all. I think people need to recognise that Britain didn't invent slavery, but we did invent ending slavery. We were the first country to ban slavery, and thousands of British soldiers, Navy men, died fighting to enforce the end of slavery. And we also, as a country, we paid a huge amount. And I think this call for reparations is really dangerous because it's saying that people should be divided according to their country, according to national background, and according to ethnic background, and also people are responsible for things that other people did. Not even people related to them, but people who just were from the same country. So that's making a really nationalist point. That's pure nationalism and pure ethnography as well.
How do you quantify it? How do you decide who gets the reparations? Who do the Turks give reparations to because of the Ottoman Empire? Do I get reparations because my ancestors were enslaved and killed in Ireland? Who gets what?
Exactly. I mean, everybody's enslaved everybody else at certain points. Everybody's ancestors have probably been enslaved. They're only a tiny fraction of a percent of people in the UK who own slaves. And we had Berber slavery, we had Viking slavery, we had Roman slavery. So, if we try and unpick all this and work out who owes what, we're going to be here all night. It's going to be like trying to work out the bill after going for a meal with Lewis.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, Lewis, because how seriously, I mean, how do we... No. It's true. It's difficult to quantify. There's that element, isn't there? But also, there are actual slave trades going on in the world today. Wouldn't it be better to focus our energies on stopping that rather than talking about people who aren't alive anymore?
Maybe, but we can't do that because they're coming after the English people who brought more good. The second greatest country in the history of the world is England.
What's the first?
First
Scotland.
would have to be the Romans.
The Romans.
The Romans.
Yeah.
and any country where England has been to has left a residue of goodness.
But you can see in recent history... Look at Gaza. But wait a minute.
Well, we came in there late. If they just listened to it.
OK, but what about... I mean, there are some cases in recent history. So, for instance, the policy of redlining, housing allocation in certain states in America, disproportionately affected black families who are today living with the impact of that. That's true, isn't it? So couldn't we do something? Isn't that a form of reparations that might be justifiable?
I think, you know, if you're going back decades and decades and decades, then, you know, it really becomes too hard to sort of, you know, give any reparations or set anything right. And we've also got to accept that, you know, sometimes the world's unfair and you've got to just pull on your big boy pants and deal with it.
And anybody who asks for reparations, you might consider just killing them.
Yeah.
Lewis, every time you say something like that, I have to point out that Lewis doesn't mean anything he says. He's not, in fact, calling for any violence there whatsoever.
I'm not calling for it, but I think the fact is...
I think just let it go.
There's a saying, every dog has its day, Andrew.
Let's move on to a question from Stephanie. Stephanie, where are you?
Hello.
Hi.
Should Rachel Reeves apologise for raising our taxes?
It's an interesting one. And with the budget, of course, you know, the Rachel Reeves and the Labour Party, who kept saying that they weren't going to be doing this kind of thing, they've reneged on a lot. To be fair to Labour, they say they've inherited a lot of these problems from the Conservatives. That's what this budget was about. Don't you think that's fair?
Yeah, we inherited a lot of problems, so we're going to make them worse. I mean, it's not the best pitch I've ever heard from a government. No, I mean, what this country desperately needed was the civil service, the public sector to be slashed back and made much more efficient. And some, you know, obviously some purposes in the civil service are just completely useless. We don't need an arts council. We don't need diversity coordinators. There's so much that can just be, so much dead wood that can just be slashed away. Each local authority doesn't need a policy department. What's Camden's policy going to be different to Islington's policy? They need different people writing it. So there's so much wastage, there's so much money sloshing around in the public sector, and instead our government is going to make it more. So before the pandemic, the share of GDP spent by the government was below 39% of GDP. After this Labour government, it's going to be 44% of GDP. It's insane. The state is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's like hiring it's like they've come in, it's like somebody losing a job and then, I've lost my job, I'm going to hire a butler. It's like, no, you need to cut back on your living expenses.
But how on earth do they think that all of this will kickstart the economy? I mean, I think it will.
They don't want it to kickstart the economy. They want everybody dependent on the government, whether that's either in a public sector job or on welfare. I mean, what they're doing is actually they're slashing back. They're taxing investment. I mean, private investors know where to allocate money, allocate capital to get the best growth for the economy, and they're taxing that. They're going to restrict that. I mean, if they had any sense, they'd be cutting taxes for private investors.
Well, let's move on to some balance. I mean, Lewis, I want you to defend the Labour Party and defend the budget and defend Rachel Reeves. Away you go.
I'll defend her because everyone knows how horrible those people are. So why should she apologise for being as horrible as people thought she was going to be?
I mean, it's an interesting form of defence.
It is but it is nonetheless a form of defence. People know how horrible the left is. Okay? Who deserves to be? Who deserves?
A lot of the left-wing voters don't think they're horrible. That's why they voted for them.
So why should they? They don't have to give an apology to those people because they think, well, that's what needs to be done. Labour believes in like magic money. You just keep on spending money; it'll come out of the thing.
So you think this budget is just a manifestation of evil?
Well, they are evil, but what makes them less evil than the Tories is you had higher expectations for the Tories, and they just.
No, I think left-wing voters are motivated by envy and bitterness, and so many of these policies, like putting VAT on private schools. If you're sending your kid to a private school, you've already paid for a place in a state school, and you're taking the burden off the state.
With you,
wait a minute. You don't think maybe that both sides are neither evil? They just think that they have a different idea about how to run the world and how to make things better.
So people shouldn't be allowed to have the education of their choice, they're choosing for their own children. I mean, I don't think that's.
I think they think it's for the best.
I think that's an evil thing. I think, you know, thinking you know best for other people is an evil point of view. Darth Vader thought he knew best for the people of Tatooine.
Maybe Darth Vader was misunderstood.
So now but he's calling me evil because I know better than all of you.
You are evil. You have a black heart.
Yes, I have a black heart because I know best. These people don't know best. British people, you shouldn't ask them to apologise because the people who are their followers don't need an apology, and it's not going to work for the rest. The fact is, Tories should apologise for COVID, for climate change.
You've gone on to the Tories now. Is there anyone you like?
somebody who's going to say we're going to fight for the Picts, the Vikings,
Picts and the Vikings,
the Angles, the Saxons, the Jutes, the Normans, maybe the few residual Romans that are still living here, the Nigerians
I've got a centurion living down my road, actually.
Yeah, you know what? Someone should fight for that
they
guy.
Absolutely should. OK, let's move on, because I do feel sorry for him wearing that helmet. Anyway, let's move on now to a question from Rachel. Where's Rachel? Hiya.
Hi. Should schools concentrate on teaching children rather than what their background is?
Yeah, this is an interesting one, because apparently schools are now going to be marked down by Ofsted. Ofsted is the school inspectorate if they've got too many middle-class children. Leo, do you think that's fair?
No, not at all. I mean, this is another example of Labour just cutting down aspiration. The British dream is that you can work and scrimp and save to buy a semi-detached house in an area where you can be middle class and send your kid to a nice school. And now you can't even do
what's
that.
What's the justification here? What's the thought process behind this?
The thought process is nobody should be allowed to excel. Everybody's got to be the same level of mediocrity. You're not allowed to have any. You know, two middle class people get together. They might conspire and start a functioning business.
Wouldn't it be better to just bring back the old grammar school system where working class kids could actually get somewhere? You know, wouldn't that be a better system? More social mobility? You know?
First of all, I don't understand the terms that you're using in this country. What a grammar school is, or a middle. Fact is, I don't even know what you mean by middle class. And middle class in America means someone who makes a $50,000 a year.
Is it? I thought it was more like doctors and lawyers and that kind of thing.
No, it has to do with how much money you make. You call yourself middle class. A factory worker back in the day, before the American industrial base was destroyed, were middle class.
Right.
So here, when you use that, you're thinking of a certain thing, middle class evil. Whereas Kamala Harris is using it, even though she wasn't.
Well, she says she's middle class.
Yeah,
that's her thing.
because that means something good in America. In this country, it just means something bad. The truth is, the government should be getting out of the business of sort of vetting schools of how good they are. We shouldn't have anything.
So you shouldn't have Ofsted looking out?
No, you could have a private thing. You could have an independent website that's rate my school. Is my school a good school?
Well, they do have things like that.
Yeah, so why should the government be spending our money to do that? And why should the government be owning schools? Why should there be a...
So you think all schools should be private schools?
Yes.
Okay.
We don't need... Because you've been to the public schools. My kids went to schools in Peckham. And just...
Any good?
Horrible. What do you think, any good?
Well, I've met your kids. They turned out pretty smart, didn't they?
Well, smart for British people.
OK, let's get a question now from Hugh. Where's Hugh? Hiya.
Was that too much?
A bit too much. Ignore
Never
it.
too much. With the National Trust being so woke nowadays, do we even trust them with the nation's culinary heritage, let alone
yeah,
buildings?
they're going for a vegan move. They want 50% of the cafeterias in National Trust properties to become vegan. I mean, Hugh, you make a point about, they've been pushing sort of various woke ideologies for a long time now. This is now the vegan ideology. But the thing is, they're not really playing to their base, are they? Because it's mostly elderly people who just want, a shepherd's pie.
They want a slice of gammon.
Yeah,
No, they do, and I think it's ridiculous. I mean, vegan food isn't real food anyway. It's the food you put on your plate next to your real food, and you scrape into the bin once you've eaten your real food.
They should have vegan options, right?
A little vegan cooking tip: if you mix some tahini in with your vegan food, it actually makes it easier to scrape into the bin afterwards.
That's a nice tip. But
this is the National Trust. They shouldn't be dictating. And also, they're also going to be going on about net zero and stuff like that. For vegan food, you've got to have completely different cooking utensils. You've got to use different oil and all the rest. You can't fry it in the same pan as you just fried pork sausages in. So all that is going to mean the carbon footprint is going to go up.
Yeah.
Interesting. What do you make of this? You don't go to these sort of stately homes or anything, though, do you?
Well, I used to go to the stately homes until you had to be stately in order to pay to get into these.
It's because they banned you.
Because, no, they're so expensive. The truth is I'm surprised they still have stately homes. They haven't torn them down. And that they, because
it's our heritage.
Yeah, because they hate the heritage of old Picts and Jutes and Vikings and Cornwall people.
You are really on one
tonight. Yes, because I've realized what the issue is. It's a discovery. The truth is that I'm surprised
OK, there we go. Whenever Lewis says the truth is, he's got absolutely no idea.
I agree with Leo on this. Vegan food, if you eat vegan food, you deserve to die.
But this is because you just eat animals. That's all you eat.
And look at how great I look. 67 years old.
You look great, but the animals aren't feeling so good.
67 years old. Not a bit of exercise. I don't do any exercise anymore.
And how's your cholesterol doing?
My cholesterol, because I know this cholesterol isn't important.
Well,
it was a lie.
It's really through
it was
the
a
roof.
lie. It's through the roof. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's through the roof.
And look at Joe Biden. He's got really low cholesterol. He's brain dead.
OK, let's move on now. How would you like to win your entire Christmas this year? Well, we're giving you a chance to do just that with the very latest Great British Giveaway. Picts are allowed to apply as well. And here's all the details that you need.
We could be delivering the perfect Christmas to you this year. First, we'll give you £20,025 in tax-free cash. Then we'll give you £5,000 to spend on all of your Christmas presents. Christmas lunch, that's on us too. With a further £500 in vouchers to spend at your favourite supermarket. Finally, a GB News Christmas goodie bag. And the best news, you'll get it all in time for the big day. For your chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2 or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
And coming up next on Free Speech Nation, just 2 days to go. Who do you think is going to win the US election? We'll be debating that next. Please don't go anywhere.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
We shot with the London Eye in the background, so it's quite an iconic shoot to do my cover of the Playboy magazine. So,
and you moved into the mansion for a while. Hugh called you the British Carmen Electra. You were one of his favourites, and it's renowned for its parties, of course. Over there, you must have had a few of those. Must have been wild times.
Fantastic parties, yeah. I mean, I met some incredible people. I will forever respect him and everyone at Playboy for the love and the support.
And you were on giant billboards, you were modelling for Nike, for Reebok, you're earning thousands of pounds a day.
Well,
absolutely like living the dream in terms of a model's lifestyle, and then things began to change.
Well, I've been living in Windsor for 4 years, and I can't get back into Windsor at the moment. The rents have gone ridiculous. I was paying $550 a month, and then the landlord just turned around one day and said I need to be paying $750. And I didn't really have a proper tenancy agreement, and I looked through it and I said, oh, can we get something in writing? And he was like, oh. So in the end, I wrote a tenancy agreement out from off the internet and I got it all signed. But then he went, if you're not going to pay the extra £250 a month, then you're going to have to move out. And I was like, well, you're going to have to give me 4 weeks. I can't just move out. I've got nowhere to go. And I think he thought he could just throw me out there and then, and he said, I've got someone that's going to move in that's going to pay £700-800 a month. So I went and got the tent, and I thought maybe this will be the way I can go for a few months or so, and it was still summer a few months back when I became homeless. So, I got the tent and I got all the cooking equipment and what have you from the money I got from some of the jobs I did. And I thought, you know what, I'm gonna go and be a free spirit for a bit, and I'm gonna have to just do my own thing. And you know what? It was the biggest mental relief to be able to have my own space. I mean, that was so liberating. Absolutely.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. So the US election is nearly upon us as America prepares to go to the polls on Tuesday in one of the most consequential elections in recent memory. Current predictions show that it's too close to call in the all-important swing states. We'll, of course, be covering the election throughout the night on GB News. But now, let's get the latest with Democratic strategist Bob Weiner and former Republican congressional nominee Jake Hunsaker. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. Bob, I want to come to you first. You must be thrilled that it's looking like Kamala Harris is up in the polls in Iowa. Do you think she's got this one in the bag?
Well, the Iowa Des Moines Register poll is the gold standard, and for a state where she was down to be up by 3 in the latest poll, most people have closed down the polling already, and they're not actually doing it anymore. The major papers, the Des Moines Register did. The trending is everything, and that's what happened in 2016 when Trump won. Was the late trending went toward him, and the polling wasn't showing it. So here we are showing it, and the reason is I've seen the worst close of any campaign I've ever seen in my life, with the garbage comment calling everybody against him garbage. Protect women whether you like it or not. Hey, every woman and every man who loves a woman loves to hear that. Especially with a guy who wants to grab you by you-know-what, and to claim that Cheney should have 9 rifles trained at her and executed. What a dumb way to close out a campaign. So what's happened is he has scared the latecomers.
But Bob, you do acknowledge that he wasn't suggesting she should be in a firing squad. He was suggesting that Cheney might change her policy on international military intervention if she were herself fighting in a war. That's clearly what he was saying, right?
Oh, seriously? Did you listen to the clip? Because that's not what he said. It came later when he realized, oops, I got to clean this one up, and suddenly the back half of the
I don't think you're right there, Bob. I think it was very clear what he said.
He let off with the 9 rifles trained at her. I don't care what his reasoning was. 9 rifles trained at Liz Cheney. That's what he said, and he can't get away from saying it. The other point I want to make
Jake on that. Do you accept what Bob is saying there, that however, whatever his intentions were behind these kind of gaffes, that the phrasing of that isn't very good, and a lot of people are turned off Trump when he makes these kind of points?
You know, what I've heard from colleagues and from voters is that Republican voters who support Trump typically take him very seriously, but downplay the seriousness of his words. Democrat voters are opposite. They really, really take very seriously the words Trump uses, downplay him as a figure, as a politician. And I think in 2016, obviously the country got it wrong. The pollsters got it wrong. Look, Tim Walz was on record saying just yesterday to his campaign staff, don't follow the polar coaster in these last couple of days. The polls have been misleading before. They could be, misleading again. Iowa is a surprise, but obviously we want directional sense of where the campaigns are trending. Look, this morning, and I'm no denier, Donald Trump is in a little bit of damage control right now. This morning, his campaign coming out, condemning his remarks about him not minding if the media, the fake news media, needed to take some bullets for him at some point, words along those lines. Look, I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative, I'm not stupid, and I obviously hear the words Trump says. They are problematic. The behavior that he exhibits over and over is actually counter to what pollsters expect presidential candidates to do in the last 48, 72 hours of their campaign. But it has served him well in the past. We'll see how it pans out this time.
But Jake, if that is the case, and if we all agree that Trump has the tendency to say things that are going to alienate a significant proportion of the electorate, why should he have a chance in this? Why do you think he still has a hope?
What's interesting, I was reading an article just yesterday in the New York Times that indicated that the demographic shifts, the willingness of voters to follow identity political lines is diminishing. As, and they did, review analysis on 2020, 2016. People are much less woke inside of themselves when they take stock of their own opinions than they profess to be externally. Voters behave differently externally than they do internally. And that's why Donald Trump has a shot here, because look, even our country's even split right now. Swing states evenly split. He's not a fringe figure. His rhetoric is not fringe. It resonates with a certain subset of the American voter base.
Let me bring Bob in on that, because I want to ask you specifically about Kamala Harris, because, of course, a lot of Democrats had huge reservations about Kamala Harris back when they thought it would have been Biden running. You know, and she dropped out of the primary early because she wasn't going to get any votes. You know, this hasn't historically been a popular candidate. Do you think something has changed?
Yes. Jay is 100% right that voters aren't following political lines. They are following cult lines now. And he's right that it's less about the politics. That's why NBC just today came out with a poll showing that the undecideds are breaking 10 to 15% in these last days toward Harris. New poll just today. That's the trending. That's what counts. And I've said all along, you remember, Andrew, that the Harris, Nikki Haley votes, the 10 to 15% at the end, that even when she was out of the race, didn't vote for Trump, and the 30% that voted for her when she was in, they will not tell pollsters that they are actually going to vote for Harris. And the Republicans are enormous for Harris. There's no Democrats for Trump. There's the Republicans for Harris. And those are all the national security and former people in his cabinet. And this thing is breaking. I feel like this is now going to be a 5-point win, a larger than expected win for Harris. Well, that's my latest prediction.
That's very interesting. But can I ask you, Bob, because you rightly pointed out that some of Trump's rhetoric is ill-advised, to say the least. But is it not also similarly ill-advised that the Harris campaign has been calling everyone fascists, calling everyone Nazis? I mean, that kind of thing can be really alienating, given that fascism is a very specific historical thing. It's not really applicable to the more authoritarian tendencies of Donald Trump, is it?
Milley and Kelly, the two four-star generals closest to Trump, both said he is fascist. And Kelly and Milley both brought out the dictionary and went to the authoritarian routine and firing and victimizing and imprisoning your opponents. That's what fascist does. That's what fascist is. And that's what Trump tried to do at the end of his 2016 term when his Justice Department refused and was threatening resignation, and then he had to back off.
So, Bob, just a serious question, though. By that standard, though, given that, you know, obviously he was talking about locking Hillary up but never actually did it, when the Democrats were cheerleading the manipulation of the law to imprison Donald Trump, does that not, therefore, fulfill your criteria of fascism?
It's not manipulating the law when a jury of your peers calls you guilty. You're found guilty of abusing women.
But the charge was spurious, wasn't it?
His foundation was closed. His college was closed. This guy... Harris is right. She's prosecuted these kinds of guys before.
But it was beyond the statute of limitations. They had to literally hook it on to another allegation.
No, they closed his foundation, and they closed his foundation. They closed his college, and he's found guilty of fraud in his company now. And he's look, this guy is scamming everybody to buy his Bibles that are free when you get them in hotel rooms.
Jake, can I ask you about that? Because, you know, all of this rhetoric that's been thrown around, fascist, to be fair, Donald Trump has also been calling Harris a fascist. And I would say that neither side are correct to call either fascist. Jake, what do you think of all that?
You know, this goes back to my earlier point that the polling indicates that people don't really care about the rhetoric as much as, and probably they should, to be honest, to Bob's point. You know, some of this rhetoric is indefensible on both sides. The left has ratcheted up the rhetoric against Donald Trump. Donald Trump, that's his whole playbook is rhetoric. And so the rhetoric needs to calm down on both sides. But listen, the rhetoric is not pushing the polls right now. It is policy. And Bob should know better than anyone from the Clinton era. It's the economy, stupid. That is consistently voters' #1 concern this election cycle, outside of the drama of this soundbite, that soundbite, this campaign cleanup, whatever you have happening in the last 48 hours. They know that prices have gone up. They know that it's harder to put food on the table. They know that we are not powerful trade partners anymore, and we are paying the price of that as consumers. Look, I'm as reluctant a Republican in this dynamic as anyone, but I have to acknowledge, as many voters in these swing states, that times are tougher under a Biden administration. Financially, culturally, the conservatives have been penalized over and over in the way that we've described. And these are the things that matter going into Tuesday.
OK, but I can very much sense Bob wanting to come in on that point. Bob.
The economy point is just not true. If you've driven around to your gas prices now, I'm looking last night as I'm driving, $2.89 for gas, under $3. Prices are down on gas. Prices are down on food. Prices are down on housing. And the Harris plan on the economy is to jack up things like Biden did. By the way, Biden stopped a recession that all economists said was going to happen. Biden-Harris stopped the recession by jacking programs and funds into the economy. He gets no credit for that. He stopped a recession, and now the World Bank says the U.S. is powering the world's entire economy. The International Monetary Fund says that, and the economy is a lagging indicator, and it's coming around now. It is now coming around.
So, Jake, what can Trump do to improve things if he were to get in? What do you think would be the main things that he would be able to do, particularly with the economy?
Look, Trump could do himself a giant favor by staying on his talking points. Will he do that? Very likely not. But his talking points are valid. They're the economy. They're the sloppy border policies of the Biden administration, the influx of illegal immigration. This is objectively the case that voters care about these things, even in the aftermath of the Puerto Rico comments that the Trump comedian made at Madison Square Garden. We thought we would see fallout among Latino voters. What we're seeing is that Latino voters in key areas like Allentown, Pennsylvania, even growing communities in Georgia, certainly in Nevada and Arizona, they view the economy and the border as the #1 issue still, regardless of the rhetoric that Trump and his campaign.
But Jake, I understand your point that you're saying that the rhetoric is sort of beside the point, and actually there are more substantial issues that people should be talking about and that voters care about. But it is true, is it not, that on both sides, the temperature has been raised. I mean, we've had assassination attempts, for goodness sake. And is it the case that after this election, either way that it goes, that do you really believe that the other party will accept the result? Because I have a sneaking suspicion that however the outcome is, it's going to be denied strenuously by each party.
Well, only one party has a track record of denying election results, and that's unfortunately mine. And so I'm going to give Bob a point on this one. I'm from Utah. And in Utah, we have a different brand of conservatism. We were a little bit reluctant on the Trump train. We watched 2021, January 6th, very, very concerned. And we are taking, many politicians on my side of the aisle have taken an oath, a pledge to accept the results of Tuesday's election, whatever they are. And so I have to be very adamant, very clear that, only one party has shown a reluctance to do this. And unfortunately, it's mine. I don't support that.
And you don't think Hillary Clinton was very sceptical about the result in 2016, and you don't think that Nancy Pelosi has said that this was not legitimate? I mean, Nancy Pelosi did describe it as not legitimate, did she not? That result.
Hillary is a friend of mine, and she put into her book that it was the Comey news conference 10 days before that flipped 10 points. She accepts the results as they happened. But the reason they happened was Comey's friendship with Giuliani, who got his friends to call, a star. That's what happened in that situation.
But you know what? Let me get back to on Tuesday. Whatever happens, both parties have an opportunity to either put their heads in the sand or to recalibrate. And if Trump wins, Democrats will have a very, very poignant moment to recalibrate and recenter on what matters. They are losing minorities in droves. They are losing Rust Belt workers in droves. And they've got to acknowledge that. Now, if Trump loses on Tuesday, Republicans have to acknowledge we're losing suburbs. We're losing college-educated voters. We are not resonating with young voters. And the Trump strategy now, if he loses on Tuesday, will have lost us 2 presidential elections. We haven't taken the Senate in 3 cycles if we lose it on Tuesday. And so really there will be a moment of reckoning if Trump loses. Both parties should go, move on very quickly from denial and on to problem solving.
Well, let me ask Bob specifically about that. So if it is the case that the Democrats don't win in Tuesday's election, do you think there will be that kind of soul searching? Do you think they will say, well, why are we losing minorities? Why are we losing the working class? Or do you think they might just double down and make things worse?
Well, for the record, Harris has said if she loses, she will accept the results. Trump has never in his life said that, number one. And number two, the real movement here is, as many have said on TV now, that people don't want the government and Trump in their wombs, their classrooms, and in their privacy. And they certainly don't want him stealing their votes, which is what he's trying to do. And by the way, on those assassinations, some of the at least one of the 2 was a Trump supporter, it turns out. So let's not blame it. It's a nut. Those are nuts that do that. It wasn't any political feeling that.
I think that is contested, Bob. I think it was someone who was once registered with the with the Trump side, but I don't think we can call it a Trump
Well,
supporter
there you go.
necessarily. Okay, well, Bob and Jake, I really appreciate you coming on to discuss this, and good luck on Tuesday. OK, well, next on Free Speech Nation, Germany this week has joined the list of 17 countries that allow citizens to self-identify their gender. I'm going to be joined by Rona Due live from Berlin.
Hello there, good evening. This is your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. We've been searching for the colour amongst the grey clouds this weekend, and that is continuing right until the very last hours of the day. Still a lot of grey skies for much of England, Wales and Northern Ireland throughout this evening and overnight. The odd spot of drizzle will be out there. The clearest skies will be reserved for the far north of Scotland. Here, temperatures will drop off a little bit more. Patchy frost is possible overnight. Elsewhere, though, that blanket of cloud will hold temperatures up on the positive side of things. With high pressure in charge, it does mean we have relatively light winds across the board tomorrow, but we are still plagued by all of this cloud. So the skies are going to be pretty grey and drab for many of us. Mostly dry, but I certainly can't rule out the odd spot of drizzle around in places, particularly around coasts and over the hills where it could be quite murky at times. The best of the sunshine first thing will be likely again for the northern areas of Scotland. But once we get into the afternoon, hopefully we should start to see the cloud breaking up a bit more, particularly for the likes of Western Northern Ireland, parts of Western Wales, some potentially Cornwall as well. Also the far southeast of England, tapping into some of this clearing sky across France as well, allowing that sunshine to poke through later on as well. Temperatures will be roughly where we'd expect them to be for the time of year, topping up around 11 to 13 degrees Celsius, but certainly those that hold on to the cloud throughout the day will be feeling quite cool. As we head throughout the week, high pressure is still in charge. It's going to keep these weather fronts at bay out in the Atlantic, so it is again going to be mostly dry away from those outbreaks of drizzle that the cloud could be thick enough to produce in time. Tuesday morning could be quite foggy in places. Do watch out for potential a little bit of disruption around at times, but again, widespread grey skies for a lot of us, just hoping for those locations to potentially see a few brighter breaks in there at times. But really, the outlook throughout much of the week is for the cloud to remain, although temperatures may be coming up a little bit later on. Enjoy the evening. Bye-bye.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Court cases.
A presidential dropout.
Assassination attempts.
This has been a US election like no other.
And if the polls are correct, it's on a knife edge.
On Tuesday night, stay up with us as the drama unfolds and America decides their next president.
We'll discuss what it means for them, for the world, and for our special relationship. America Decides, Tuesday night from 11.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Germany this week has joined the list of 17 countries that allow citizens to self-identify their gender. And this week, protesters gathered outside of the German embassy in London as the new Self-Determination Act came into force. The law makes it easier for those who identify as trans and non-binary to change their legal gender. So joining me now is author Rona Due. Rona, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Rona, can I just ask you firstly, what is this new self-ID law in Germany and what are the implications?
Yeah, self-ID means that any man can declare himself to be a woman. It's not only for persons who are transgender or something, it's for every citizen in Germany. And they can just determine their own sex entry in legal documents. And there is no check or no security check at all for this, like before with the Transsexuals Act.
And what does this mean for women's rights in Germany?
Yeah, for women's rights, it means somehow that women's rights are abolished because women's rights rely on sex. because the oppression of women relies on sex, not on sexist stereotypes, but on sex. And so if you change the law like this and say, okay, instead of sex as a factor for law, we take gender identity, this is dangerous for women.
And my understanding is that there are rather heavy penalties. People can be fined a great deal of money if they misgender someone, if they don't go along with the idea that someone can identify their own sex. Isn't all of this quite authoritarian, quite draconian? I mean, this is the kind of thing that it feels like you're taking away people, or the government is taking away people's rights to free speech, for one thing.
Yes, we have also this impression, and so we made our protest also with the images of Orwell, because it has something Orwellian, that we can't say what we see if we see a man, and that we have to fear that we get a fine of up to 10,000 euros if we do it.
Do you think that that will actually be imposed? I mean, from our perspective here, it sounds incredible, the idea that you could get a 10,000 euro fine for correctly identifying the sex of someone who happens to identify as a different sex. I mean, do you think they'll actually go through with it, or is this just scare tactics?
No, they just started to do it, and we have the experience also in Germany that these trans activists sue their way through the courts to get their will. So they are also reporting us regularly to police, like in UK, for example, with Kelly J. Keane. And I think they will do it, and they are already doing it. They are already trying it in a women's gym in Germany to sue themselves into the gym.
I mean, that's astonishing to hear. So when people like yourself campaign against this, is there a sense of fear? Is there a sense that they'll come after you next? And is that putting people off from speaking out?
Yes, of course, it is. A lot of women go anonymously because they fear to have consequences in their work, or also to get reported to police if they say something wrong. And I think that this fear is rising now. And Germany is the biggest economy, the largest economy in Europe. So this is another thing, as if it is in Belgium or in Iceland. It's another situation here in Germany.
So what do you say to people who will say, well, what does it matter how someone identifies? What does it matter if someone feels that they're a woman within and wants to use women's facilities? Why is that something that you think is wrong?
Yeah, because women have the right to female-only spaces, and it's female-only spaces exist because women have to fear male violence, and so we need these spaces. We also need these spaces to just be with each other. For example, lesbians. For lesbians, it's really important that they still have their single-sex spaces. So this is the reason, for example.
And you've made this case very persuasively. And you've been making this case to the government through your protests. Have you heard anything back from them? Are the government listening to what you've got to say?
No, we have the problem in Germany that we have this no debate strategy that the media is not really reporting about us. Yesterday, they reported somehow about us again that we are financed via Putin or financed via Mexico. This is something new, or that we are all right-wing. And they don't really see, they don't really have our perspective on the whole law.
So you're being
this is
smeared
missing in Germany.
Yeah, so you're being smeared, you're being lied about in order to discredit what you've got to say.
Yes, we are the TERFs like in UK.
Very, very interesting. And it's an interesting cautionary tale, I think, for what could happen here. Rona Duva, thanks very much for joining me tonight. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
So next on Free Speech Nation, it'll be time for social sensations and your unfiltered dilemmas. So please don't go anywhere.
Court cases.
A presidential dropout.
Assassination attempts.
This has been a US election like no other.
And if the polls are correct, it's on a knife edge.
On Tuesday night, stay up with us as the drama unfolds and America decides their next president.
We'll discuss what it means for them, for the world, and for our special relationship. America Decides, Tuesday night from 11.
Only on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
What do you think?
Morning. I think we have failed young drivers as a society, and we need to train them better and train them earlier. I think that the idea of stopping them carrying passengers for 6 months is a good idea because you've got peer pressure within a car. So yes, but I think graduated licenses are really difficult. You've got what we call the 3 E's, which is education, educating kids to drive earlier, and engineering, which is making roads better and safer, and then comes enforcement at the end of it. So I think we're failing in these two first ones, the education and the enforcement. I put my kids, all three of them, through a thing called Young Driver, which allows under 17s to drive on private land with ADI instructors and learn the craft of driving and all the below the dashboard stuff and hazard awareness long before they try and do this very compressed period of time to learn about driving. I think we're failing them. So I want to see it in schools, and I want to see them being taught much, much earlier.
Nobody's actually pointing the finger of blame, I think, at the young driver, but maybe young drivers don't understand how different it is. You feel you can drive, you've passed your test, and then a load of your friends get in the back, and suddenly the mood is different, the pressure on you as a driver is very different, showing off, just larking around and having a great time. Aisha, how do you feel about the fact that clearly young drivers do need to be protected almost from themselves, don't they?
Well, I do agree with some of what Quentin has just said, especially about starting early and especially about getting young people used to the dangers of being on the road.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. It's time for Social Sensations. That's the part of the show where we look at what's been going viral this week on social media. First up, we've got this video.
You have identified as your greatest and biggest improvement areas, and what have you done to improve them so far?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Give me a second to think about it. So I think my greatest weaknesses are my communication skills, so I'm continuously working on enhancing my ability to convey complex technical information really clearly and effectively.
I just think it's so fraudulent. I mean, the thing is, I've been playing around with ChatGPT to see what this is all about, because I think it's going to take over the world.
Yeah.
This just means that everything's going to have to be face-to-face now. You know, everyone's going to be cheating. No university degree is going to mean anything because it's going to be invented by a computer.
I've got some news for you. University degrees mean nothing already.
I mean,
they're all nonsense.
Point.
Like, people are going to say, oh, this degree in transgender poetry isn't as meaningful anymore.
Nothing wrong with transgender poetry.
That's some of the best poetry, although it often identifies as prose. But yeah, this stuff. I mean, I think actually being able to harness ChatGPT, harness AI, is probably more value than being able to answer stupid questions in an interview.
What do you think? Would you use that? Would you exploit a computer to cheat and get a role?
Of course you would. I mean, people do it now. They use a computer to type. I remember back in the day when you had to type, and if you made a thing, you had to use correct type, whatever it was.
Yeah, that's a form of cheating, I suppose.
It is a form of cheating.
Would you think better education that people wouldn't need? Anyway, we've got to move on. Let's get this next video. What's this next one all about?
Take my Pamela. The American people want to stop the chaos and end the drama with a cool new step that mamala. Kick back in our pajamas and watch a rom-kamala.
Like Legally Blondula.
And start decorating for Christmas. Fa la 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 la. Because what do we always say? Keep Kamala and carry on-a-la.
So Kamala Harris on Saturday Night Live there. Is that slightly cringeworthy?
That is 100% cringeworthy. But half the population don't think it's cringeworthy.
Really?
No.
How could you not? I mean, my toes were curling there.
But because your toes are curling, that tells you what political side of the aisle you are.
I'm not neither. I don't like either.
It's like during Nazi Germany, there were some people going, yeah, concentration camps, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think that's quite an extreme comparison. What do you think, Leo? Did you enjoy that sketch? Did that make you chuckle?
No, I mean, the left can't meme and they can't do comedy either. I mean, comedy's supposed to be, especially something like Saturday Night Live, is supposed to be really digging into, satirical, really poking at Kamala. Not just this sort of softball lob so she can knock it out of the park. It's disgusting.
What year are you talking about, Leo?
It's 2024,
Yes,
Lewis.
exactly.
You've just woken up.
Back in 1976 when it first came out.
Right, we've got time for another video, I think. Let's have another quick look at this one. Here it comes.
Oh, hi. Hi. You're so cute. What's your name?
He's deaf.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. He still likes his candy.
Yeah.
OK, so a fake child to get free sweets. Is that moral?
It's not moral, but it's a great idea. I mean, that's brilliant. We've seen stealing candy from a baby is bad, but getting a fake baby to steal candy from adults, that's genius. I've seen them do this with a mannequin, put it in, paint it gold and pretend it's a musical statue.
What do you think, Lewis? Don't you think that's a red line, isn't it? I mean, it's supposed to be...
No, I think it's perfectly fine because they're getting candy. They're going to die of diabetes. These parents, so screw them. Let them get as much candy as they want to. And then when they die, they'll say, I wish we didn't do that.
I mean, for goodness sake, you've got a way of putting a fun story and just putting it through a meat grinder.
It's totally not fun. It's like giving out candy. It's so evil.
It's evil, is it?
It's evil.
May as well give out poison to
And
the
it's
kids.
American candy, which is like fake chocolate.
Should they give out raw meat?
Yeah, that's... Don't give them ideas. I think Lewis would be well up for that. Well, unfortunately, we haven't got time for Unfiltered Dilemmas this week, but we will have plenty next week, so make sure that you do send in your dilemmas to gbnews.com/yoursay, and we'll handle those as and when they turn up next week. Anyway, thanks ever so much for watching Free Speech Nation. This was the week when Americans prepared to go to the polls. Germany went a bit backwards on women's rights, and the Tories got a new leader. Thanks ever so much to my panel, Leo Kurz and Lewis Schaefer, to all of my brilliant guests this evening. And by the way, and I say this every week, and I do mean it, come and join us. It's dead easy. Just go to www.sroaudiences.com. You can apply there to come along to the studio. We've got food, we've got drink, we've got good company. You can even hang out with Lewis Schaefer and he'll try and flog you his calendar or probably tell you about the Picts.
Yes, exactly.
That's what you do. You put people off.
Or they can find me on Lewis Schaefer Twitter.
I didn't want this to be an opportunity for you to plug your
because
website.
The people want that, or lewisSchaefer.co.uk.
Unbelievable.
And Lucy's in the process of making the new
Lewis, I'm trying to do the end of the show. Will you shut up? Mark Dolan's on in a minute. Don't forget that Headliners is on every night at 11 o'clock. That's comedians taking you through the next day's news stories. Thanks for watching Free Speech Nation. I'll see you next week.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. This is your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. We've been searching for the colour amongst the grey clouds this weekend, and that is continuing right until the very last hours of the day. Still a lot of grey skies for much of England, Wales and Northern Ireland throughout this evening and overnight. The odd spot of drizzle will be out there. The clearest skies will be reserved for the far north of Scotland. Here, temperatures will drop off a little bit more. Patchy frost is possible overnight. Elsewhere, though, that blanket of cloud will hold temperatures up on the positive side of things. With high pressure in charge, it does mean we have relatively light winds across the board tomorrow, but we are still plagued by all of this cloud. So the skies are going to be pretty grey and drab for many of us. Mostly dry, but I certainly can't rule out the odd spot of drizzle around in places, particularly around coast and over the hills where it could be quite murky at times. The best of the sunshine first thing will be likely again for the northern areas of Scotland. But once we get into the afternoon, hopefully we should start to see the cloud breaking up a bit more, particularly for the likes of Western Northern Ireland, parts of Western Wales, some potentially Cornwall as well. Also the far south-east of England, tapping into some of this clearing sky across France as well, allowing that sunshine to poke through later on as well. Temperatures will be roughly where we'd expect them to be for the time of year, topping up around 11 to 13 degrees Celsius, but certainly those that hold on to the cloud throughout the day will be feeling quite cool. As we head throughout the week, high pressure is still in charge. It's going to keep these weather fronts at bay out in the Atlantic, so it is again going to be mostly dry away from those outbreaks of drizzle that the cloud could be thick enough to produce in time. Tuesday morning could be quite foggy in places. Do watch out for potential a little bit of disruption around at times, but again, widespread grey skies for a lot of us, just hoping for those locations to potentially see a few brighter breaks in there at times. But really, the outlook throughout much of the week is for the cloud to remain, though temperatures may be coming up a little bit later on. Enjoy the evening. Bye-bye.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're giving you the chance to win everything you need to celebrate the festivities. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Court cases.
A presidential dropout.
Assassination attempts.
This has been a US election like no other.
And if the polls are correct, it's on a knife edge.
On Tuesday night, stay up with us as the drama unfolds and America decides their next president.
We'll discuss what it means for them, for the world, and for our special relationship. America Decides, Tuesday night from 11.
Only on GB News.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. It is 9 o'clock on television, on radio and online. In the United Kingdom and across the world, this is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my big opinion, following Labour's catastrophic Halloween budget, and after a raft of tax rises never previously mentioned, this new government is pathologically dishonest. Well, don't worry, I'll be dropping a few truth bombs about Sir Keir Starmer and his devious new administration in just